Hey, welcome to another Keyfactor tutorial. Now we're actually going to cover peer configurations with the how and automation. Hopefully you caught our other video where we kind of covered what peer connector is and ended with config dump is our way to do this through automation. Now we're actually going to get into that how. So let's hop in. All right, Tamoy, how do we do this? Where do we start?
Yes.
Tamoy, we're going to start with config dump as we talked about in the last video with peer connections. We talked about in the last video that it's a JSON structure that we can use to do this. And there's YAML as well, but we're definitely going to recommend the JSON way. And so let's dive into this and tell me more about it.
With config dump, you can create a single JSON file and you can describe the whole deployment, at least in the context of peer configuration, completely. This JSON file you can directly use in your Helm values.yaml, or you can perhaps use a config map and provide this JSON file to EJBCA. And when the peers is deployed, or CA is kind of spinning up in the installation level, it kind of tries to reach out to the remote peers, and if everything's good to go, you automatically have your infrastructure spun up. First, we will try to make things keep simple. So as we have discussed in the last video, we are trying to go through each and every point and how you can configure it in your config dump. So the first point was to describe where to reach out to, what is the URL. So in this case, we are reaching out to EJBCA array, which is deployed into some another namespace. You can have multiple installations of array. It can also be in completely different cluster where it has its own load balancer, IP address and such. Each and every one of them we can describe here, and for each of them we have to kind of copy paste this thing, and so that is why it kind of becomes the same thing you are copy pasting. But
so you could template this JSON.
Yes.
And if you didn't recognize, that is a JSON data structure too.
Then we go on to the second point, so the authentication or the authorization
or roles.
Yes, both of these things you can kind of take care of in the same JSON structure. Please note here, we are truncating the whole JSON because it's a little bit big thing, but please keep in mind that once you have set it up, perhaps manually, you can always export this JSON file using config dump REST API, and then perhaps change the values. So for an example, this match value EJBCA array test domain.se can be your own domain, and there can be multiple role members. So once again, with magic of copy paste and JSON file, you can extend the automation. Then of course the authorization. So what are the rules allowed? So in this case, we are going for a little bit permissive rules. So for an example, we are allowing all the CAs to be used from the peers. For an example, array can enroll against all the CAs, but you might want to go for something a little bit restrictive in your production setting, where that can be figured out from some trial and error. Then once again, you can do an export with this REST API and figure it out.
So to add on to that, what's really great is when you have a test environment to do this in, and then you can take it from the test, export it out, and then bring it into a QA, refine it there, and then export out of the QA and bring it into production. And it makes it very easy to do infrastructure as code through automation.
Yes. And given that you are using this test environment, you are kind of permitted to make some errors. And when you are going for production environment, at least you are sure that hey, I have tested it out, it is the same thing. At least that is what it's supposed to be.
Right. So now we get into this authentication, right? How does this play? Because we talked about that in the last tutorial. Now we kind of got a little visualization of what's going on.
The remote authentication or remote authentication key binding in EJBCA is meant for setting up this mutual TLS from CA to the peers. So the crypto tokens, you have configured a crypto token when you set up your first CA. In the crypto token, the private key is stored, and this private key is then creating a CSR or certificate signing request, which is signed by the corresponding certification authority. Most of the cases, the management CA, which is used for the administrative purpose.
Yeah, data plane CA.
Yes. And after you have signed it out, then you have the certificate. So you have your private key, you have your certificate, you are good to go for the mutual TLS.
And so one thing I point out too, some people will use a soft token for their peer connection with this. Other people might want to put that key on the HSM.
Yeah.
and maybe they'll even use a separate partition than the partition where the CA already is at, or slot, even though it's still a separate key from the CA key. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you want to do that. So just you can put a little bit of thought, maybe what you want to do with your deployment when you're creating that key.
And another thing, after you set it up once, you can use the same remote authentication for all your peers. So you do not have to like keep repeating it for like
each RA or VA.
Yes.
Or you could split them up with a key for VAs and another key for RAs. There's a lot, sky's kind of the limit on that.
Yeah. It is the same thing like the remote authentication, and this is how we can describe it in
JSON annotation, yes.
That's it on the CA side. Now we come to the PR side. So for an example, RAs and the VAs. So what are the things we need to do? Of course, if you remember, we have to tell it that, hey, CA is going to connect to you. That's one thing. Once more, we take a look into like how the roles needs to be configured. It is the same JSON as before, but this time they have different permissions. And when we'll come to this additional configuration, we'll see what are the possibilities. Please note that the allow incoming connections is set to true. It is by default false, and this is how we are allowing a CA to reach out to our peers.
That's a good point, right? So the CA, you set allow incoming to false, and on your peer, the remote end, you want to set that to true.
For this authentication and authorization, note that we are saying any certificate or mutual TLS, if it is signed by management CA or the data plane CA, if it is a corresponding common name. For an example, in this case, we have created a remote authentication key binding. We put the common name as PR key. So we have a mutual TLS certificate with this PR key, and we are telling the peers, for an example, this RA. Hey, if someone connects to you and you have the common name is this, allow this for PR connection. And then finally, if you see towards the bottom, we are saying, hey, you are RA and this key is trying to do some RA related actions with PR incoming and RA slave manage, allow it. And also allow anything related to management CA. You will have different kind of configuration, and once more it is encouraged to use a test environment, set it up with UI, and then we have proper connections, proper roles, and these things configurations are done, export it out to your production settings. And we show here a little bit more details where you can do like with the roles a little bit more. But this time, instead of the PR key, we are setting up your super administrator. So if you remember, super administrator was the administrative user you have created when you have set up your CA, like the first time you access it through browser. You are also conveying the same information to your peers, so that in all the installations of the EJBCA, you have a,
So it's locked down, because the container will be open. Depending on how you deploy, most of the time it's open. So what we're doing with this is you're saying, hey, set up my super admin role. We're locking it down with MTLS with the match value of super admin for that super admin cert authenticating in.
Yes.
That's pretty hot.
Yeah. What are the additional configurations we can do and we actually should do? First thing is we kind of need to import the CAs we have set up in the CA nodes. So in CA, we have a lot of other configurations. So for an example, where is my CA's key, so in the which crypto token, that kind of thing does not concern the peer, but it needs to know the CA certificate. So the CA certificate needs to be imported
which would be an external CA. Is the way it show up in EJBCA. If you see active, well, Houston, you've got a problem. You definitely want to see external for that importation of the CA cert.
Just import it like this, and as we have mentioned earlier that you want to enable a few protocols. For an example, you are going for ACME related enrollments or REST-API enrollments in an RA, you want to enable those. If you are in VA, you might want to enable OCSP and leave others disabled. So all of those things, you can do it from here, and everything works properly. Then you have functioning RS and VS, and you're good to go.
This concludes the tutorial of going over how to use JSON to automate to creating peer connections with EJBCA in the Helm chart. JSON's definitely super handy. Having a test environment, highly recommended, so you can get the configuration set up and export the JSON, and from there you can template it and be able to use it through the environments and have a repeatable process and have infrastructure as code to deploy EJBCA with external RAs and VAs. All right, questions or comments? Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.